Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today at our mental health forum. Just a few housekeeping topics before we get started. All of our participants are automatically muted upon entry. We will be having a Q&A session after our presenter speaks. So at the bottom of your screen, you should see an option to ask questions. Feel free to go ahead and ask questions throughout the forum, and we will address it as time allows during the Q&A session. Additionally, we are recording this session, and so we will email the recording to our participants along with a link to a handful of resources that our presenters have given us. And now I am pleased to introduce Susan Rauscher, the Executive Director of Catholic Charities.
Morning, everybody, and welcome to today's forum. I'm both excited and joyful about being able to bring this to you. I think it's a topic that gets mentioned as headlines, but we don't dig into nearly enough or create enough opportunity for these discussions. So I'm going to quickly thank all of our presenters for being here, and I'm going to thank all of you for attending. And we're going to jump right into it. Speaking for us today, we're going to have Marissa Barr, who is a regional director for the Southwest region of Catholic Charities, who will be addressing the mental health trends as a result of COVID-19. Susan Cabin is the director of education at the National Alliance on Mental Health Illness. We'll be talking about mental health issues facing children after COVID-19. And then we'll also hear from Jessie Patkowski, pardon me, I'm tripping over my own tongue here, who's the area director of the Western Pennsylvania American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And she's going to talk about suicide-related issues facing adults and children. And then closing us out will be Jack Shaw, program coordinator for Listening Friends. And he's going to open up question and answer session specifically and talk about information on grief support groups as we go through that process. And so I'm not going to spend too much more time talking. Again, welcome and thank you for being here. And I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and turn it over to Marissa to get us started.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me today. As Susan mentioned, I am the regional director. I oversee the Southwest region for Catholic Charities. That's the Beaver County, Washington County, and Greene County offices. In addition to that role, I am also a licensed therapist. I wanted to start today with sharing a story while, of course, maintaining confidentiality of the client that I'll be speaking of. We worked with a client whom is a widower and has pre-existing health conditions. This particular client identified extreme anxiety throughout the pandemic, which ultimately led to depression as well. The client's feelings of loneliness were pretty extreme, but I am happy to report that in this particular case, this client did not experience suicidal thoughts or thoughts of self-harm. However, the client was oftentimes emotional and described the loneliness as very difficult to manage, and oftentimes described experiencing some despair. The client was lacking a support system, and the support system which was available was experiencing their own symptoms of anxiety related to the pandemic. Therefore, the client was able to identify that sometimes their support system was not always helpful, and they actually, from time to time, would trigger one another's anxious feelings. The client described themselves as being in constant fear and second questioned every move. And some days those every moves were something such as retrieving the mail. So the client would attend session and utilize many of the should statements and ask, should I have touched the mail? Should I have talked with the delivery person? Am I now going to get sick? Due to the client's pre-existing health conditions, a COVID diagnosis, according to the client's physician, most likely would have resulted in hospitalization, which led to even more worrying, which then triggered some fortune telling. Another thing this client reported experiencing was triggers to previous grief. This client was sort of at that point of acceptance and learning their new roles without their loved one present. But once the pandemic hit, the grief really came rushing back. The client identified losing my loved one feels like just yesterday. Through therapy, the client was able to learn mindfulness techniques and ways to challenge self defeating thoughts. So, worrying turned into planning, and fear turned into learning ways to be safe. The client identified engaging in daily mindfulness techniques, which helped clear any foggy thinking. And the great thing about mindfulness techniques is that the central nervous system is not capable of feeling anxious and relaxed at the same time. Therefore, when the client triggered relaxation techniques, such as deep breathing, it was instant relief, which then provided the client with the ability to challenge their self defeating thoughts. So, I just wanted to give you all an example of just one of the many cases that we're seeing throughout this pandemic. Um, uh, to tell you a little bit about us, we have been fortunate enough to transition to teletherapy services. We did so rather quickly. Admittedly, this was a project which was in the works, but the pandemic, without a doubt, sped up our timeline and we moved pretty quickly. Clients are reporting loving the video platform. Of course, we use HIPAA compliant software and upgraded technology as well. But all clients adjusted extremely well. And those who describe themselves as feeling a little nervous about the video option warmed up to it pretty quickly. I am also happy to report that we did not lose a single client due to this service delivery. So that was excellent. Next, I wanted to talk with everyone today about some of the trends that we are seeing. As you can imagine, we've seen a dramatic increase in calls for counseling services. It seems as though when one client's ready to terminate, there's another one calling that day and wanting to engage in services. So the revolving door is constant and the need is very high. We have seen a dramatic increase in previous clients returning for services, probably the highest we've seen since I've been at the agency. So, a significant increase in calls from previous clients identifying the need to re engage in therapy. Some clients who are seen biweekly increase appointment frequency to weekly sessions. And ages of those requesting counseling services really fluctuates, but we have seen an increase in adolescents and young adults seeking services. This trend has also shifted in terms that the actual clients are the ones reaching out for help versus the parents or caregivers or maybe even friends being the ones to contact the agency. That's a huge shift that we've seen. Typically in the past, it was the parents calling. Clients are identifying symptoms never before experienced. Therefore, many are new to therapy. We had one client recently who identified physical symptoms of anxiety, stomach aches, headaches, not really understanding any of it because this particular client never experienced anxiety before. Grief counseling has also increased. So, some in relation to losing a loved one to the virus. In those instances, clients have reported a lot of difficulty due to the inability to visit their loved one or hold services for that loved one. When you think about it, funerals are really designed to help the living through the grieving process. And the opportunity to hold services or celebrate a loved one's life has not been available to many due to the pandemic. I think something new most of us haven't ever seen before. Requests for grief counseling have also been for those who have not lost a loved one to the virus, yet they are identifying the struggle of working through the stages of grief, especially at a time where social distancing is encouraged and outside support, such as attending a grief share or a church service, may not be a comfortable option for the client. Those who have experienced trauma are also reporting a need for support to learn healthy coping skills during this time. Many reporting, I have too much time on my hands to sit and think, or I am home too much by myself and I can't get some of these thoughts out of my mind. Um, and we found this to be especially apparent in those cases where clients do reside alone. We have seen more parents reaching out for services due to increased stress from maybe homeschooling or wanting to learn ways to help their children cope through this pandemic. Many parents have reported that their children are now experiencing some sort of separation anxiety and or depressive or anxious symptoms of their own and not really knowing how to navigate through that. Some parents have also identified not having the additional support of grandparents and caregivers they once had due to social distancing and the dangers associated with the virus. Requests for couples counseling have also increased, and many local agencies have reported calls related to domestic violence and anger management services have also increased. First responders, such as healthcare workers and those within social service industries, for example, social workers and therapists, have also reached out for help during this time. Many are reporting feeling overwhelmed and in high demand. Therefore, self care is lacking. Some have reported the need to separate from their own loved ones on a regular basis due to being high risk and not wanting to get those family members ill. Many have contacted our agency for support not relating to mental health, such as rental assistance, utility assistance, and other tangible needs, have actually participated in either counseling or some sort of stress management um, education. That's also a dramatic increase we have seen. Some people which have established careers and then lost their employment as a result of the pandemic are feeling lost and depressed. We have also worked with some who have expressed increased anxiety and depression post COVID-19 diagnosis and not knowing how to move forward or experiencing some guilt for maybe spreading the virus to some loved ones. So those are just a few of the trends we are seeing. I know I gave you a lot, but we've had a lot of calls throughout this pandemic. So I wanted to let everyone know that some of the cases that we are seeing at our agency. Next, I wanted to shift gears to some interesting research. And this is all according to some research from the Kaiser Family Foundation. During the pandemic, 4 out of 10 people have identified symptoms of depression and or anxiety, which is up from 1 out of 10 adults who reported symptoms from January 2019 to June 2019. A tracking poll from July 2020 has shown that many adults are reporting negative impacts on their mental health and well-being. In fact, 36% report difficulty sleeping, 32% have reported difficulty eating, 12% report increases in alcohol consumption and other substances, and also 12% report a worsening of chronic conditions due to worry and stress over the coronavirus pandemic. Many have experienced pandemic-related consequences, such as job loss, reductions of income, closing of universities and schools, just to name a few, which could be contributing factors to some of these symptoms. During the pandemic, a larger than average share of young adults, so this is ages 18 to 24, report symptoms of anxiety and or depressive disorder. In fact, that was 56%. Compared to all adults, young adults, again, that age range of 18 to 24, are more likely to report substance abuse. So that's 25% versus 13%. And suicidal thoughts, 26% versus 11%. Prior to the pandemic, young adults were already at risk of poor mental health and substance use disorder, though many did not receive treatment. So these statistics continue to show the trend of young adults being at great risk. And since research also shows that the brain doesn't fully develop to age 25, this is some extremely alarming numbers. Research during the pandemic points to concerns around poor mental health and well-being for children and their parents, particularly mothers, as they are experiencing challenges with school closures and lack of childcare. So women with children are more likely to report symptoms of anxiety and or depressive disorder than men with children. That's 49% versus 40%. In general, both prior to and during the pandemic, women have reported higher rates of anxiety and depression compared to men. Something else that was very interesting was comparing essential workers to non-essential workers. So many essential workers continue to face a number of challenges, including greater risk of contracting the virus than other workers. So compared to non-essential workers, essential workers are more likely to report symptoms of anxiety or depressive disorder. So that's 42% versus 30%. Starting or increasing substance use, 25% versus 11%. And suicidal thoughts, 22% versus 8% during the pandemic, which is extremely alarming. According to the CDC, and based on an adult survey conducted in June 2020, 31% of its respondents reported symptoms of anxiety or depression. 13% reported having started or increased substance use. 26% reported stress-related symptoms, and 11% reported experiencing serious thoughts of suicide within the last 30 days, which was very alarming to read. So many wonder life after COVID. Many wonder now that restrictions are being lifted and businesses are reopening, how will mental health continue to be impacted by COVID? History has actually shown that mental health impact disasters outlast the physical impacts, suggesting that today's elevated mental health need will continue well beyond the coronavirus pandemic. For example, an analysis of the psychological toll on healthcare providers during outbreaks found that psychological distress can last up to 3 years after an outbreak. Due to the financial crisis coexisting with the pandemic, there are also significant implications for mortality due to deaths of despair. A May 2020 analysis projects that based on the economic downturn and social isolation, additional deaths due to suicide and alcohol or drug misuse may occur by 2029. And according to the National Institute of Mental Health, it is speculated that a notable fraction of these experiencing depression and/or anxiety will develop chronic symptoms severe enough to actually meet the criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder. I found this to be very interesting. A new report produced by the CDC found the amount of adults with recent symptoms of anxiety or depressive disorder increased from 36.4 to 41.5, while the percentage of individuals reporting unmet mental health care needs increased from 9.2% to 11.7% between August 2020 and February 2021 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Unfortunately, the supply is not keeping up with the demand, and there is a speculated shortage of mental health professionals, particularly in Pennsylvania. Many clients are voicing the need to continue a teletherapy services. Although clients are optimistic about the pandemic, many are uncertain of what future seasons may bring. Furthermore, as many are starting new employment, clients are eager to seek services virtually to avoid requesting time off and things that might come along with it. It is definitely an easier option for many people. We have seen a dramatic decrease in our no-show cancellation rate. And I wonder if the flexibility and availability of the telehealth options have played a role in this trend. Clients are also reporting some stressors are shifting to things such as re-engaging in employment, finding new employment with new occupations, and a whole new territory that many people have never found themselves in the past. So, if you are in need of mental health support or know someone who is in need of mental health support, please encourage seeking treatment. It is important to remember that only healthy people seek mental health treatment, as they are willing to acknowledge that something is not working, in which they need some help, need to learn some coping skills. I tell clients all the time, only healthy people reach out and make that first step because, as you all know, we cannot change other people. We can only change ourselves. So that's the first step. So thank you for your time today, everybody. I wanted to turn it over to Susan Cabin, Director of Education for NAMI, Keystone, Pennsylvania.
Thank you so much, Marissa. I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing those great statistics also. I shouldn't say great. I should say alarming statistics. So as Marissa said, my name is Susan Cabin, and I'm the Director of Education for NAMI Keystone, PA. NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and we are the largest grassroots organization that's dedicated to helping families and individuals who are affected by mental illness. We do this through education, support, and advocacy. NAMI's strength lies in the fact that all of our education programs are peer-driven and peer-led. In addition to peer education, NAMI also offers support groups, and all of these supports and programs are offered at no charge to participants. So as to follow up from Marissa's talk, I would like to talk a bit about youth mental health and how we as parents, educators, and community leaders can better support their growing mental health needs, both during and after the pandemic. As a background, prior to the pandemic, research from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention survey revealed that adolescents' suicide-related behaviors were increasing at a significant rate. From 2009 to 2019, we saw high school students who were experiencing persistent sadness and hopelessness increase from 26% to 37%. We also know that 1 in 6 young people ages 6 to 17 will experience a mental health disorder, and that half of those kids won't receive treatment for those disorders. The pandemic has certainly increased the vulnerability of all youth and made them more susceptible to mental health issues. It has also increased the risk factors in those who were experiencing mental health problems prior to the pandemic. There has been an overall increase in anxiety and depression among youth as their developmental need for peer interaction is currently not being met. They feel isolated, they feel disconnected. Their outlets for stress-reducing activities and events have almost been eliminated. Now more than ever, it is imperative that we as adults learn how to better engage youth in conversations about their mental health. As caring adults, we also need to know how to recognize possible warning signs of a mental health crisis and to learn how to respond so that young people receive appropriate and timely help. We all know the importance of early intervention when it comes to our health and our wellness. And there are 4 basic steps when helping a young person who may be experiencing a mental health issue. I'll start with step 1. Step 1 is learning to recognize possible warning signs of a mental health problem. There are 3 factors that we should consider when gauging Is this normal behavior, or should we be more concerned with what we're seeing? So number one, we want to consider how severe are these symptoms that they're experiencing. Number two, how long have they been experiencing them? And number three, how are the symptoms affecting their daily functioning, like going to school, maintaining social interactions, their sleep habits, and so on? Here are some examples of behaviors that we should pay attention to. Are they persistently sad for more than 2 weeks? They present irrational, sudden fears. Do they require constant reassurance that they or others are okay? Do they harm or physically injure themselves? Do they display persistent and drastic mood changes? Are they experiencing sleeplessness or an inability to get out of bed? Are they very reactive to criticism or rejection? Have they begun to isolate themselves from friends or family? Again, we want to look at these behaviors and gauge how severe or drastic they are, and how long have they been experiencing these, and do these behaviors and thoughts impair their daily life? This will help you when you speak to a child about what you've observed and the level of concern that you should have. Step two. Step two is having that conversation with the child about how they're feeling and what you have seen. You should share with the child the specific behaviors that you are seeing. Give good, concrete examples of what you've observed. Make sure that you listen and then give them time to talk. Silence is okay in this situation. Reassure them that they are not weird and that there is help for what they're experiencing. You can encourage them to share more so that, possibly together you can come up with a solution for them to feel better. When having this conversation, be very mindful of your body language and expressions so that you don't appear judgmental or surprised or shocked at what they're sharing. That's a sure way to shut down anyone. Let them know that you're there to listen and that this is their time to talk about their thoughts and their feelings. Try to remain calm. Oftentimes, the child will take cues from your tone and reactions and respond to you in the same manner. Most importantly, ask what you can do to help. What do they need or think they need? Is there someone else that they would like to speak with? Would they like you to go with them? Most importantly, reassure them that there are many ways to get help and that they don't have to continue to feel this way. Now, here's an important component of that. There are things not to say to someone who's experiencing mental distress. We all go through this sometimes. You will be fine. All of us think that is the most reassuring thing to say to somebody, and we've put ourselves in their shoes and it's going to be okay. Unfortunately, when you are under distress like that, you hear this as being dismissive and neither reassuring or validating to what you're really feeling. You might try something like, "You sound like you're very sad and that you're hopeless. Let's look at things we can do that will help you feel better so that you can start enjoying yourself again." If you ask the child, "Are you okay?" be prepared. That's a one-word answer question. You're going to have follow-up conversation and follow-up questions to that. So when you approach the child, come prepared with questions that require more than just a yes or a no. Be careful that you don't lead a question to a desired answer. For example, "You're not afraid to come to school, are you?" "No, I'm definitely not afraid." You're leading them into that, well, it's not okay to be afraid. So of course they'll give you the no answer. So rather be direct. Are you afraid to come to school? What are some things about school that make you feel afraid or anxious? These again will make sure that you're not just doing yes or no answers and can keep the conversation going. Most importantly, don't promise to keep a secret because you may need to share information in order to keep the child safe. And you can explain that to them. They will understand. And lastly, when you're having this conversation or when you think you see warning signs, the last thing that you want to do is try to diagnose when you're looking to help someone. This conversation is to see if the child is okay, to build trust, and to seek assessment or treatment as needed, not to diagnose a problem. So step 3. So after you've observed behaviors and then spoken to the child, it's time to talk with other adults who spend time or are involved in the child's life. These would be people like teachers, parents, physicians, counselors. Ask them what they're seeing. Be aware that oftentimes the behavior at home differs from the behavior at school and vice versa. It'd be brainstorm ways that may alleviate some of the behaviors that are causing distress. You've heard it takes a village. It definitely takes a village. Talk with a mental health professional and share your concerns and ask if an assessment is needed. If you're a parent and you don't know where to find a mental health professional, we refer a lot of people to, it's www.psychologytoday.com. Here you can search for therapists that treat youth. You can see what type of insurance they take and what their specialties are. It's a very good resource to have on hand because it can be difficult to navigate or find a professional. You can also brainstorm ways to help a child build protective factors. And I think this is really important coming through and moving on through the pandemic. Children and youth need to know things such as coping skills, whether that be teaching them writing exercises or going outside to exercise, even if it is by yourself, listening to music, something like that, so that they can find out what it is that helps them alleviate their stress or their fears and anxieties. Protective factors such as learning how to set goals, understand that feelings of disappointment because, we've seen a lot of sports canceled or they can't go and see their friends. So learning how to deal with this now that I can't do this, I was expecting to go to this birthday party, and how do they deal with all of this disappointment and move on from it? And then also teaching them the importance of having both routines, but also unstructured time. And that's what we've seen have been as a little difficult because of trying to set a routine and have unstructured time with this new balance of what virtual school looks like. So I think that's a very good skill to teach. And then moving on to step 4, which is to connect with resources and supports. And this is for the parent or the teacher. Educate yourself about mental health whenever you can. Find peer support groups, find people that are going through the same thing that you can bounce off ideas and rely on about what's going on with your children, what you're seeing in school. You can also contact organizations such as NAMI. NAMI has peer-led family support groups, education courses, and informative presentations for families and individuals that are living with mental illness. At NAMI, we like to say, you can't know what no one has told you, and we combat the stigma of mental illness with education and support. This brief information that I've shown about how to communicate with your child if you feel that there is a problem or that something needs to be discussed, a behavior that is affecting their lives in a negative way, is part of a longer presentation for parents and teachers called Ending the Silence. That's a NAMI signature program. We also offer an Ending the Silence module for students, and that particular program has increased help-seeking behavior for students and their friends, as well as helping them to better understand mental health conditions. There's more information regarding NAMI Ending the Silence and how to schedule a presentation on the NAMI Keystone website. Please know that these presentations that we do for teachers, parents, and for students are, again, offered at no cost to the participants. So just to wrap this up, we know that this is very hard work, and it's often challenging to help someone who isn't sure what they are experiencing or what will help them, let alone a child or youth that doesn't have the vocabulary to tell you what they're thinking and feeling. So to create an atmosphere where young people feel safe to discuss their mental health requires us as adults to become good listeners, to provide young people with a vocabulary so they can express what they're feeling and thinking, to teach young people the facts of mental health, just like we do for physical health. And lastly, to provide support and resources to help them find their own way to feeling and living better again. I want to now turn this over to Jessie Patkowski. She is the area director of the Western Pennsylvania chapter at American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate everything you had to say about NAMI. You're a great organization and we do a lot of work with you. So we are looking forward to doing more with you in the future. A lot of the information that I will be giving is kind of a follow-up to what Susan gave with a little bit more detail for some of the things that we've noticed and some more research that we've done, which is again what NAMI was talking about. So as Susan said, I am Jessie Patkowski. I'm the area director for the Western Pennsylvania chapter of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. At AFSP, our mission is to save lives and bring hope to those affected by suicide. AFSP creates a culture that's smart about mental health by engaging in the following core strategies. We fund scientific research, we educate the public about mental health and suicide prevention, we advocate for public policies in mental health and suicide prevention, and we support survivors of suicide loss and those affected by suicide in our mission. So we fund research to improve interventions, we train clinicians in suicide prevention and advocate for policy that will save lives, and we work to find better ways to reach those who suffer and encourage schools, workplaces, and communities to make mental health a priority. So whether you've lost someone or struggling with suicidal thinking, you are not alone. We bring people who have been affected by suicide out of the darkness and give them opportunities to help others. So in focusing on suicide-related issues for our communities, suicide is a public health problem and leading cause of death in the United States. But suicide can be prevented. More investment in suicide prevention, education, and research will prevent the untimely deaths of thousands of Americans each year. Reports from the Centers for Disease Control show us that in 2019, which is the most recent year we have data for, 47,511 Americans died by suicide in the United States, making suicide the 10th leading cause of death. It is the second leading cause of death for ages 10 through 34, and the fourth leading cause of death for ages 35 through 44. 12 million Americans have serious thoughts of suicide, and over 1 million Americans have attempted. 90% of those who died by suicide had a diagnosable mental health condition at the time of their death. In Pennsylvania, suicide is the 11th leading cause of death, losing over 1,890 people to suicide in 2019. Over 6 times as many people died by suicide in 2019 in Pennsylvania than in alcohol-related motor vehicle accidents. So let's talk a bit about who is at risk for suicide by looking at risk factors. Risk factors are characteristics or conditions that increase a chance a person may take their life. Just like someone who is at risk for heart disease because of high blood pressure or a history of heart disease in the family, some people are at higher risk for suicide than others. The main risk factors can be grouped into 3 categories: health factors, historical factors, and environmental factors. These risk factors can converge at different times in life and increase a person's risk for suicidal behavior at particular points in time. The first type of risk factors include health factors, such as biological and psychological medical conditions, the most significant of which are mental health conditions. Most people who die by suicide have an active mental health problem at the time of their death. Depression is the most common mental health condition and the one that is most associated with suicide. Bipolar disorder is also shown to be high risk, although the disorder is less common than depression. Other conditions to be aware of are conduct disorders and eating disorders, especially in teens, substance use disorders, generalized anxiety disorder, and schizophrenia. Because these conditions put a person at greater risk for suicide, detecting the presence of a mental health condition is critically important. The best way to be sure when you feel concerned or detect a possible change in you or your loved one's mental health is for the person at risk to seek a professional evaluation and effective treatment. Many people may not have realized that their distress has actually become a health problem. Providing information about how to access mental health care or a crisis number if their distress is high can be a solid step in helping them connect to the help they need. Mental health conditions are not the only health factors that are associated with suicide risk, though. Serious or chronic health conditions can increase risk, especially when the person also has mental health issues. Chronic pain and serious head injuries have also been found to increase suicide risk. The second type of risk factors include historical factors, such as a family history of suicide, a family history of mental health conditions, or past trauma. Do not go on to die by suicide. Previous suicide attempts are also considered historical risk factors for suicide and also put a person at increased risk. The third type of risk factors are environmental factors that involve the circumstances of a person's life. Often there are aspects of a person's environment that can contribute to their overall level of risk. So we're going to look at a few of the most common. Having access to a way of killing oneself is referred to as access to lethal means. This means they have an access to a variety of things. Research has also shown that contagion, the exposure to another person's suicide or to graphic or sensationalized accounts of suicide, especially among those with other risk factors, can increase a person's risk of suicide. Prolonged stress may include harassment, bullying, relationship problems, legal problems, and unemployment. Stressful life events, which vary across a lifespan, include experiences like divorce, legal problems, or job loss. So to better understand suicide risk, I'm going to give an example of a set of risk factors that could converge in a person who is suicidal. So this example shows what is often the public perception of suicide. When someone dies by suicide, often the story only talks about the environmental factors. People see a life event like a breakup or bullying or a job loss, and then they see the person die by suicide. So they might assume the person killed themselves because of that stressful life event. But that's never the full story. What others don't know is that the person who died may have had genetic risks for suicide. Maybe they were suffering from depression and anxiety disorders, and their work life had become increasingly stressful. Their underlying depression and anxiety could have made the situation at work even worse, or the work stress could have made the depression worse. Perhaps they'd also been drinking more than normal. The key is that the combination of risk factors could have contributed to the suicide death. Therefore, while a life event can play a precipitating role for suicidal behavior, without other underlying risk factors, life events alone aren't thought to cause suicide. Now, when looking at risk factors for children, some of these are similar and they do affect children, but I also want to look at additional environmental factors such as bullying and social media. The relationship between bullying and suicide is complex. When other risk factors are present, being bullied can be a precipitating stressor that can increase risk further. Research indicates that persistent bullying can lead to or worsen feelings of isolation, rejection, exclusion, and despair, as well as to depression and anxiety, which can contribute to suicidal behavior. Bullying behavior also indicates underlying risk in the bully. Any involvement with bullying behavior, either as the bully or the victim, is a stressor which may significantly contribute to feelings of helplessness and hopelessness that raise the risk of suicide in teens. That being said, suicide is not a natural response or reasonable solution to bullying. Bullying is one factor, but does not directly result in suicide, and suggesting that is the case could increase contagion risk. It is important to note that the large majority of people who are experiencing bullying do not become suicidal. In terms of social media, the research in this area is emerging and social media continues to evolve at a rapid rate. Some people utilize social media with a mixture of positive and negative effects. For young people with risk factors for suicide, including depression, anxiety disorders, low self-esteem, or extreme interpersonal sensitivity, social media can have negative effects on their mental health. It is important to note that young people may also use social media to reach out for help or to indicate their distress behaviorally or verbally. For example, suddenly disconnecting from social networks via social media, making statements on social media indicating a desire for suicide, to die, or to escape their pain, or disclosures about gaining access to lethal means. Just like we encourage young people to alert adults if they notice or hear these things being said, they should also be encouraged to notify an adult if they are concerned about a peer's social media posts. Heavy use of more than several hours per day of social media is not recommended. Social media utilization should ideally be limited in quantity and approaches. Some people astutely take long breaks from social media for their mental health because they have learned that this is an important part of their overall strategy. There are prevention methods for someone who is at risk for suicide, such as limiting access to lethal means, getting someone to mental health treatment, and focusing on self-care. But what we're going to focus on right now is what we all can do to prevent suicide. And this is where some of what Susan and I will be similar. So it's important to have a caring, supportive conversation with someone you might be worried about, to allow them to share what they are experiencing. A conversation is a way to show you care and allows you to gain more information about their level of distress. Watch for warning signs in yourself and in others. While many of the suicide risks we discussed earlier endure over a longer period of time, warning signs are observable signs that signal suicidal risk in the near future. It is important to pay attention to both the risk factors we discussed before and the warning signs we're going to talk about right now. If you see warning signs, reach out to individuals in your life you're concerned about and reach out to others if you're struggling. Seek mental health services if you are depressed or if your anxiety regularly interferes with your daily life, and encourage others to do the same. Suicide warning signs are typically displayed in three main ways that we can detect: talk, behavior, and mood. Many people who are suicidal talk about ending their lives. This may be directly or indirectly. A person might say it outright, or they might joke about it but take it seriously. Some people say they have no reason to live. Others say things to let you know they may feel trapped or that they are a burden to others. Or they might talk about feeling overwhelmed or being in unbearable pain. Behaviors that are atypical for an individual should also encourage you to speak to the person about what you are noticing. People thinking about suicide can display certain behaviors. There may be an increased use of alcohol or drugs. They may have trouble sleeping, either experiencing insomnia or sleeping too much. They may start acting more recklessly. They might withdraw from activities, especially from activities they normally enjoy. They might isolate themselves from family and friends. They also might look for a way to kill themselves, such as searching online for methods. They also might give away their possessions or show related behavior like reckless spending. People who are at risk for suicide can display, often quite subtly, any of the following moods: depression, apathy, rage, irritability, impulsivity, humiliation, anxiety. So moods one would expect of someone who feels overwhelmed and desperate. We all have ups and downs in our mood, but when you notice a change that seems uncharacteristic or concerning, it is important to speak to the person about what you're noticing. For example, sudden unexplained happiness can indicate the individual has decided on a plan and is relieved they will no longer be in pain. That's a lot of things to look out for. So to sum it up, look for changes in behavior and trust your instincts. Assume you are the only one who was going to reach out. In too many instances, people talked about their concern amongst themselves, but hesitated to reach out to the person directly. So here's kind of a rule of thumb. If you're wondering if someone is depressed or overly anxious, that's a sure sign you should reach out. And the same goes for you. If you're having suicidal thoughts, that's a sure sign you need to seek help. If you've reached out before, reach out again. The first time the person may not be receptive, but keep trying. Try talking to someone else or with a professional. And if suicide turns out not to be a concern, they may still be in distress and they may feel comforted and supported just by knowing you care and are taking the time to listen. So how do you reach out to someone? Talk to them in private. Listen to their story. Express concern and caring. Ask directly about suicidal thoughts. Don't be afraid to ask the question, are you thinking of ending your life? We've learned that asking that question of someone who is not thinking about suicide will not put thought of suicide into their heads. Encourage them to seek mental health services. And if in crisis, take them to help. There are some things to avoid when talking with someone who may be suffering from depression or anxiety. Avoid minimizing their feelings. Those of us who have never experienced major depression literally cannot imagine what that feels like. Avoid trying to convince them life is worth living. If a person is nearing a crisis point, they are not thinking clearly. Philosophical debates about life being worth living tend not to be helpful. And avoid advice to fix it. If a person was having a heart attack, you wouldn't tell them to start exercising or eat a healthier diet. If they are in crisis, what they need is to be heard and then led to help. Listen to their story and offer to help them find a health professional. Help them take active steps toward keeping their environment safe. And obviously, if there's immediate concern, you can always call 911. So we can all work together towards dealing with these suicide-related issues and helping our communities, our adults, our children, everyone. And that's all that I have. So I'm going to pass it off to Jack Shaw. He's the program coordinator for the Lifeline of Listening Friends.
Thank you, Jessie. I wanted to welcome everyone who's viewing this forum live, but also those who may be viewing it on a delayed basis and may be watching it tomorrow or the next couple of days. And I would encourage all of you who are watching it live to, as Bethany said in the beginning, we're going to email everybody a link to the forum. So if you really found something really that you were able to learn from this forum, to forward that to different people in your community, to your family members, friends, to church members who may need to hear some of this information. So I wanted to give you a little bit of background, a story about listening friends. And I think, in doing so, I'll tie it into why it's relevant to what the topics we're talking about today. So listening friends is composed of all volunteers, and and all of our facilitators and our support groups have been trained and went through an extensive training program to facilitate grief and loss support groups. So we actually began as a small group in 2015, and we were all members of St. Jewish Parish at the time, St. Joseph Parish in our Harrod Township. And we took a course called Mental Health First Aid. And out of that, we developed what we called a mental health and wellness parish ministry, and in which we wanted to bring an awareness to mental health and provide programs. And we began in 2016 with May being Mental Health Awareness Month. We had a speaker series where we had various speakers come in and talk about different topics. And one of those was a speaker from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And we were surprised to learn at the time that there was no support groups in the Pittsburgh area for people who lost a loved one due to suicide. So we were determined at that time to begin and form a support group. And our first group started in, again, 2016 at St. Joseph Parish in our Harrod Township. And that support group is continuing to meet. And they meet the first Thursday of every month at St. Joseph Parish. And then, as you know, living in Pittsburgh, if you going across the river is like going to another country, another state. So it was important to develop support groups in various communities. So our second group that we started was in the South Hills, and we currently meet the first Tuesday of the month there at the Seton Center in Brookline. And because of COVID-19, all of our programs have been shut down up until recently, but beginning next month, we're going to be operational again. And our suicide loss support groups all meet once a month, and they are open where anybody can drop in anytime. We do ask people to call in advance and to register, let us know that you're coming. My information is going to be on the Catholic Charities website, as well as all the information and resources that you've heard from the different presenters. They're all going to be on the website of Catholic Charities so that you can sort of check that out and get those viable information. So then we have another support group in the east of Pittsburgh, and we just started a group there on St. Maurice Church. It's right off of Ardmore Boulevard, and that's going to be on the second Tuesday. We also have a group in Washington County that meets at the St. Benedict the Abbot Church, and they also meet the first or the second Tuesday of the month. So, and all of our facilitators have been trained through the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention to facilitate these groups. But at the same time, when we started our first group at St. Joseph, we realized we didn't want to leave out those people who lost a loved one, maybe due to a heart attack, to natural causes, to cancer. So we started two sort of tracks of offering support groups. And we developed a program that we call our 7-week grief and loss support program that we call the Healing Pathway Through Grief. And we offer these, it's a 7-week program that we offer in the spring and the fall. And we're currently offering it at various locations. And I will say our team has also worked with various parishes to develop their specific grief and loss program. So when we started ours, we were all surprised that there was no really model out there. I mean, we called a number of churches and it was all over the board. Some groups, support groups, met for 2 or 3 weeks. Some groups ate for 8 or 9 weeks. So we really had to, search the internet, and we came up with this 7-week program. And part of our program includes where we have helpful DVDs. We have insightful information on the grieving process. We offer the opportunity to share your grief and loss with others. And then again, we have the trained facilitators to help guide the group along the healing process. So, again, you can find the information on the website and the times and locations that we're offering that. And we'd be happy to come out and work with your church or faith community in developing a support group. So, and I just want to emphasize, again, so this is where it ties into the theme, what we're talking about. So when you lose a loved one, when you have somebody that you love that, who died, you're really experiencing trauma. And what we have learned is it's important that you process your grief and your loss. And it's important that you process your trauma. And I just wanted to share something that has been, that I just found so profound, and that it's been part of my life. Is Father Richard Rohr, who's an author and written many books and done many retreats. He had said this in one of his books and his retreats. He says, if you do not transform your pain, you will transmit it in some way or form. So I'm going to repeat that again because I think it's so prophetic. He says, if you do not transform your pain, you will transmit it in some way or form. I think what he meant by that is if we do not process it, if we not take the time to talk about it and share it and process our experience, it just builds up into anger, into anxiety, into depression and fear. So it's important to do that. And how we process it a lot of times is by talking it out, by sharing it, by spending time just to be with it. So one of the things that we're looking at trying to do and to kind of create is what I call sacred circles, where we sort of have support groups where, especially coming out of COVID-19 and the pandemic, where we can sort of talk and process about this experience. I think one of the things that would be tragic is, there's a lot of talk about getting back to the way things were. And I think in one sense that would be a big mistake, because I think what we need to do is process what we have and grow from it. I think, we should all sort of realize, what it means to be separated in isolation, what it means to go through the experience that we have. So I think, to be able to take that experience and move forward is what we need to do. And when I talk about the sacred circles, if you think about it, back in the early cavemen and women, they would gather around the fire camp at night, and they would, form a circle as they kept warm around the fire. But they would share their day's experiences. Maybe like somebody would say about how they were searching for food and how they escaped the dinosaur, or their day's events. And then, of course, you have the mythical story of the Knights of the Round Table, where they sat around a circle to share their thoughts and look at the problems of their society and their times. And then in the 50s and 60s, especially, you had the people sitting around the family table around dinner time. And I think that's one of the things that we've lost a lot. In our busy schedule today, we go through our day's experiences and we're running here and there and we grab something to eat, but we don't sit down to talk about what happened during the day and what we are feeling in that. So I think it's really important to form these circles and to try to share some of our feelings. And some of the calls that I've been receiving in terms of somebody losing a loved one, or having difficulties in my role in terms of the church where I serve here, is that people are just, I think some of the things that were brought out about the anxiety that they were feeling, they've been in isolation for so long. There's an anxiety that some people said about coming back to church, about being with other people, and should I wear a mask or shouldn't I wear a mask? So all these things are happening, and we've gone through a whole year of so much uncertainty and doubt in that, and I think it's important to sort of being able to talk about that. So today I wanted to sort of close my part here by just sharing that the purpose of today was to highlight some of these issues and topics that are out there, to share with you some of the resources. But we are planning on offering a more in-depth program. We're looking at the second week of August. August 14th is the target date, where we're going to have again, it'll be in the morning from about 9 to noon, but it will be an in-person program where you can actually sort of talk about some programs that you can implement in your church or your parish, about things that you can take away with you to sort of help develop a mental health and wellness sort of ministry, or just to be aware of some of the issues so that you can really help someone. I will share a story with you that, one of our members, when we took that mental health first aid, she, it was a week after this person was at her workplace, and a coworker was exhibiting some signs of depression and being distanced in that. So this person, who's a member of our support team, reached out and asked her, "Are you feeling okay? Or, is there anything I can do? Or do you want to talk?" And she shared with her about how she was distressed and depressed. And so, as Jessie will attest to, she asked a question that you're supposed to ask, that some people are sometimes afraid to ask. She said, "Are you thinking of suicide?" And the person said, yes, they were. And in fact, this person actually had picked out a bridge that she had picked out that she was going to jump off of. So, but what this person was able to do was, through the dialogue and talking and that, she was able to gain her confidence and tell her about the other options, and she was able to get her help in that. So our goal is to have more people aware of the resources out there, to more aware of what people are going through, so that you can sort of reach out and provide help and help direct people to the help that they have. So please mark your calendar, and we'll have more information about that program. And finally, I just want to share with you that this coming Sunday, the Bishop David Zubik of the Catholic Diocese of Pittsburgh, he's going to be the main celebrant for what we call a memorial mass. And it's going to be for anyone who have lost a loved one due to depression or suicide. And there's still a stigma about people who have died from suicide. And within the Catholic faith community, there's often a misconception that if you have a loved one who died from suicide, that they're not allowed to have a Catholic mass or be buried in a Catholic cemetery. And that's just not true. So this mass, during the a particular point at the mass, we're going to sort of have a time that we're going to pray and remember for all of the people who have died, not only this year, but in years past, to suicide. And then just in closing, one of the things we talk about the grieving process is that we encourage people, if you've lost a loved one, either 2 days ago or 2 months ago or 2 years ago or 20 years ago, we encourage people to come to our support groups and talk about it, because I think, as one of the speakers said before, one of the things that's coming from out of this COVID-19 and all the stress and anxiety is a lot of these surface things that we've maybe buried in the past, maybe our grief that we haven't been able to process. A lot of times that rises, or different other issues have come to the surface. And so this is a time that it needs to be talked about. So I would encourage you to reach out if you feel that you need to talk to someone. Reach out to a friend or somebody from the church, or reach out to a facilitator. Again, I think we're going to have various resources on the Catholic Charities website. So I would encourage you to reach out and access that information. So basically, that's all I have to say at this time, and I'm going to turn it over now to Tyler. We're going to have questions and answers, and so further discussion for the whole panel to participate in.
All right, thank you, Jack. And thank you to all of our speakers who shared their insight and thoughts this morning.